So,
All right, so yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our How to Craft the Perfect Email webinar with Leroy Bean, very talented poet and writer from the Dayton area. So, Leroy, I will pass it off to you to take it from here.
thank you very much. I appreciate you for having me. Hope my sound is going to be okay throughout this presentation. Never know with video calls for real. But I'm Leroy. I'm from Dayton, Ohio. I'm a poet, writer, workshop facilitator. I've been pretty much full time writer for about 2 or 3 years, but I've been doing poetry since around 2014 on a serious level. But I've been writing for a lot of my life in reality. I'm a part of a group called Underdog Academy. I just opened up a bookstore called Baldwin Cafe. And I have done events with Bing Davis for his visual voices presentation, worked under the direction of Sierra Leone. So I'm definitely very heavily into the artist community. I consider myself an artist activist. And I just love writing and I love to teach my different techniques and, how I've learned to kind of control my writing process. And I believe that even though you may not call yourself a writer, we still have to write in our everyday lives. So why not gain control over that writing? And then also looking into the healing aspects of writing and how that can be helpful throughout your day, every day. So the tips I have for you today aren't going to be telling you what to say, but it will be giving you the formula to be able to take control of your writing process, so you don't come to writer's block with an email, or you don't feel like you don't know what to say. You're able to kind of guide yourself one step at a time into creating the perfect email and are being able to articulate your message. But I will be giving you definitely a few tips that I have of my own. So first thing is I love that. And when it comes to writing, you can't really develop your writing unless you write. So we're definitely going to be doing some writing during this class. So I hope you have some pen and paper next to you, or you can type on your computer if that's okay with you. Um, but the number one thing I like to do first, when I start my day, or before I start to write anything that I need to put serious thought in, I usually journal or I brain dump. If you're not familiar with those, journaling is really just kind of getting into um, kind of like writing about like a specific event or your day or anything like that to kind of just clear your mind. Brain dumping is more of a stream of consciousness. So you're just writing any and every single thought that comes to your mind that shows up the most. And you're just continuing to let that pen flow until your timer is up. Um, and within these journaling and brain dumping, you want to be yourself. You want to be 100% authentic. This is not getting shown to anybody. You want to completely pour yourself on this page, because our mind has a certain capacity. And there's a book, if you want to check it out, it's called The Organized Mind. I actually forgot who the author was, but it's by a psychologist, and he talks about how we can only process a certain amount of information per second, and a lot of the times we try to multitask and do different things at once, but that often has us leaving things out because we can't really take on so many things at once. Um, so when it comes to your thoughts and how many thoughts do we have a day, it's hard to really formulate the right thoughts to write. If you're clouded, if your mind is clouded. So you definitely have to spend some time to clear your mind. So I want to take just like 5 minutes for people to do a journal or a brain dump to kind of just clear their head, write any and everything, be 100% yourself. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry if it makes sense. Just kind of empty your mind on the page and allow yourself to be free there. And then we'll come back from that and continue with our next exercise. Think if that's cool, cool. I can't really see people, so. All right, start the timer now. Got about a minute and a half left. Go ahead and wrap up your last sentence. All right. So, for anybody who just came in, we just got done with a journal or brain dump. If anybody would like to drop in the chat how it made them feel after writing, please do. I love feedback, and I want this process to be as helpful as possible. Refreshed, that's good. I definitely consider writing or journaling, brain dumping as a form of meditation in a way. You are getting in touch with yourself. You are giving yourself that attention that you normally don't when it comes to clearing your mind. And again, like writing, and then when it comes to writing, you have to have a clear head. Um, so like the key to writing is finding, identifying, and being able to call on your writing process at will. Sometimes it's about talent or inspiration, and people wait for, oh, I'm just waiting for the right thing to hit me, and then I'll write it down. But you can't. That's a limitation in a sense, because when it comes to the point where you really need it and you're not inspired, then what do you do? How well do you know your writing process and your the breakdown of how you create if you can't really get to a point where you can write what you need to at will. So it's always about kind of identifying what does your writing process look like when you do create. There, that way you can replicate that process over and over again. And when it comes to pulling it out for an email, it's not hard at all. So when it comes down to building a habit versus talent, the habit is definitely going to overtake. It kind of gets rid of that ego. It puts you in a state of uh, of a student. You're always learning. You're always here to work through the process. And so, including writing into your everyday habit will definitely give you the strength that you need to pull words out, when you need them, and be able to articulate your thoughts. So after step one of clearing your mind, step two, you really just want to write out the idea, and see how it looks on paper or on your screen. It's really easy to just like, it's kind of like that word vomit. If you let go of, you know, the specific. So just like I was saying in journaling or brain dumping, and why I include that exercise, that process helps you get rid of this like idea that everything has to be perfect. That I have to write for this certain standard. You really and how it was put is like write crap. You want to your first draft, you want to write crap, and it's not that you should put that out there. I didn't say put crap out there. I said just write it. So in order to like get your mind organized about what you're trying to say, just spill it all out on the page, and then allow yourself to pick at those words and those phrases that call out to you, and put those in the final draft, or the next draft. And the last step is just editing. It's really all about going back and rereading, reading out loud, making sure that it makes sense, thinking about it from another perspective, changing certain words, and it's not about using big words. It's about using words that are unique. When it comes to an email, it's still communication, and it's kind of out of all communication that we have, just like texting is behind the screen and you can't really get that human feel, but you still want to be yourself in an email. You don't want to feel robotic. And it's hard for people to be able to receive your email if you're being robotic. So find a way to kind of be yourself and use these words that kind of say who you are. They kind of point to how you would operate in real life. So that way that the reason that I guess like poetry and writing really calls out to people is the description, the way that words are used, the different words that are included to really paint the picture of what you're trying to say. And when you include that, and even in everyday writing, it allows it to be a little more attractive. And people don't think of it that way because it's just an email, but it's like for some reason, like this email calls to me, and I feel better about reading it, or you feel better about sending it, and it kind of just gives a great energy to the conversation. Um, don't be afraid to edit. Don't be afraid to chop it up. Don't be afraid to write crap the first time that you draft your email. You don't have to write a perfect version the first time. Believe that is definitely okay. And other than that, man, use your resources. Use a dictionary. Use a thesaurus. Why? I was just talking about how your mind is clouded most of the time and you have to do the work to unclutter it. So why try to rely on your memory of every single word that you've ever learned in your life? Um, don't block yourself that way. That's how it's pretty easy to catch writer's block that way. Because you're limiting yourself to just your own head and being inspired and waiting for the words to come to you. So when you get to the point of like using a dictionary at the source, it's kind of like you're able to break down that wall and just kind of pick and choose the words that are right because it's giving you basically a word bank to choose from, and you can create that. Also, another thing would just be before you start your email to just write out a list of words that kind of they go with the subject of what you're trying to get across, and that way you can kind of, just like the editing process, you just kind of pick from those words and include those in your final draft as you continue to write. um is there any questions, comments from there before we go into our next writing exercise? Cool, cool. Um, so this one is a favorite of mine, and you may like it, you may not. Hope you do. But haikus. Emails are about getting straight to the point. You do not want to draft out a very long email. You want to, kind of be friendly, be yourself, give a acknowledge them, say your hellos, hope all is well, and things like that. And then it's kind of like, stay who you are in your business. In a very in a friendly way, in a personable way. So the key is to try to condense your message down to something that is digestible, and that is something that really catches the attention. And that also goes into the subject line. I'll talk a little bit about that after this exercise. But so haikus are basically, if you know anything about them, they are 17 syllable poems, 3 lines each, um, 5, 7, 5. So the first line is 5 syllables, second line is 7 syllables, and the third line is 5 syllables. They were originated in Japan, typically about nature, but they take a concept that is that is pretty profound. And sometimes it's like in a joking way, and they kind of condense it into this 3 line poem. And when you read it, it usually kind of just like opens you up. The first 2 lines tend to be kind of ambiguous, or the lead up to the punchline, which is last. But we don't really have to worry about all that. I just wanted to give some detail about haikus. However, I do want to try a haiku really quick, just to kind of get that habit. Like I said, like my workshops are about just writing in general and how different writing exercises or tools can help. So when it comes to like literary devices and types of poetry, I use those to kind of be able to translate a lesson into your everyday writing life. So since haikus are about condensing a bigger concept into a little amount of words, you can take that concept and it should be easier when you use it for your email because you have a lot more space to work with. Um, so I want to take how long? Maybe like 5 quick minutes. We're gonna do this in like 2 sets. So first, I want you to write a 3-line poem. Don't worry about the syllables. Just write a 3-line poem comparing email, either the actual like aspect concept of email or like your association with email, comparing it to something else. So a 3-line poem comparing email to, or the act of writing an email to something else. And if there's any questions or anything, I can go ahead and start the timer. Cool. I'm starting now. And if you get done early, let me know. We don't have to use the whole time. You can drop it in the chat. I like that. And about a minute and a half left. If you're having a block, kind of explore your thoughts about email, your feelings about email. When you think about email, what is it? Does it feel tiring? Does it feel exhausting? Does it feel like something you love to do? Um, or convert to, just the idea of email in general. Um, Compare email to something, to real mail, to physical mail, to uh, a bird flying to somebody else's computer. kind of just think about email outside of the box in terms of how it makes you feel, how you look at it, things like that. And there's no real right or wrong answer. Just kind of allow your mind to flow. Hmm. Hmm. That's good. I like that. And that is the timer actually. Um, nah, yeah, I really like that one. That one makes sense. It definitely makes sense. And see, like it's something that is that simple, that can be relatable to somebody else. And it's not that you were trying to come across to relate to them, but just speaking about your own experience and being authentic about how you feel about it allowed you to, write this small poem. That really translate well. And I think that we often overlook the fact that we have a lot more in common than we think. And so we often overthink it, and like because we assume that like, oh, there's gonna be judgment, there's gonna be something, oh, this is not good enough for the other person. It's like you don't even know what they're thinking or anything like that. So definitely don't be afraid to, be 100% yourself. Writing emails like cutting the grass, or and that's good enough for me because I understand that I do not like cutting grass. I currently don't even cut my own grass now. Like we pay somebody to do it. So yeah, if I could pay somebody to send emails for me, I would. um, so I want you to. We don't have to do this here, but I want you to kind of sit on those poems, and I want you to try in your free time to condense them down to 5 syllables for your first line, 7 syllables to your second line, and 5 syllables for your last line. Um, and if you have to add more syllables to fill it, like then you have to do that as well. But I would pay to have the receiver read the email. Man, and that's another that could be a whole nother concept for a small piece, like um, because that's really how email feels. But I want you to try to condense these poems down to 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and within those 3 lines, and just play around with being able to say something in a lot of different ways. Can you expand on the idea? Can you shrink it down to a couple of words but still make sense on the same level? How can you write something and then also focusing on like the first couple lines, right? Because with haikus, you only have 3 lines to say it, which means that the first line pretty much is going to be your attention grabber. It's going to be the thing that really draws the person into the email and makes them want to continue reading down to the second line. And that second line is going to be like, oh, well, what's happening now? And you have more room to expand on the idea, and the third line kind of just like completes it. And it's for some reason haikus, it sounds like they drop you off the edge, but really the poem is very well thought out and complete. So when it comes to kind of trying to gain control over expressing your ideas completely, I would definitely say work with haikus because it gives you a certain structure that you have to work within. And once you've kind of like you're proficient at it, when it comes to doing that with bigger spaces like email, it'll be a lot easier for you to fill that space with your point and not have to take up extra space or extra words. And you'll be able to, use your writing process to write that email in the length that it needs to be. They say that it typically an email should be around 250 words, definitely no more than 500. So you definitely want to kind of get into uh, making sure that you're not repeating anything, that you're not, you know, kind of giving too much information. Uh, just kind of allow the conversation to move organically. And like I said, 100% be yourself. So when it comes to the subject line, I think that personally, you should write your body first. So that way, you kind of understand what you're trying to say after you've perfected the body. then you draw from that and add that to your subject line. So how can you, and you have to think about what an email looks like, what that section of unread emails looks like to you personally. It looks like a whole lot of words, numbers, and symbols. And it's just a collective of things, especially depending on when you're looking at it. Because one part of the day it might look like a bunch of gibberish and you're not trying to even pay it no mind. And another point it could look like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. Like I can run through these real quick. Some of these is spam, some of these is social media, some are actually important, and you can definitely organize through it really quick. So you have to give other people that same patience that you give yourself when it comes to checking your email. And if you want it to stick out to people, then you really have to make sure that that subject line is on point. And that's not like we're talking about advertisements necessarily, but we are trying to get people to like know exactly what we're talking about from jump. Like even if it's asking a question, or kind of like reminding somebody like, hey, it was nice meeting you last week. I wanted to contact you about such and such. But it's really about like you have to reread, read out loud, look over your body as much as possible, and you'll definitely find the right words to put in your subject. Um, so I think that don't try not to overthink it, but it's definitely another one of those haiku aspects of like learning how to say a lot in a little and drawing the attention with that first line because in along with comparing your email to hundreds of others on the page, it's also only like a small amount of space that shows up, and the whole subject doesn't even appear on that line. Sometimes it's just like the first 5 to 7 words, if that. So really kind of keep that in mind as well as far as your word choice. Be very intentional about your word choice. And that's why I say don't be afraid to use dictionary and thesaurus really quick. It's a type away. It's, look through your phone at this point. It's not like you got to go through a book. So definitely don't, when it comes to writing, you can't be lazy. You can't say, oh, I want the quick way out. I just want the words to say. You can't do that. If you really want to develop your writing process, then it kind of means developing your writing process in general, your whole aspect of writing in your life. You can't really just pull it out for email. Once you learn to write or you develop a writing process, you use it for everything. So just really get into the habit of practicing that and understanding the benefits that can come with it. Not just for writing email, but for refreshing your mind, getting a clear thought process, waking up in the morning, doing a journal entry to ground yourself, expressing yourself about something that you can't necessarily talk to anybody about, or maybe you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and you need to work through your own emotions and you write it out. There's so many aspects that writing can be a release for you, and it also just pours into every other writing aspect of your life as well. So if you want smoother emails, if you want the process of writing an email to be easier, then you have to you have to include writing in your life in general. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be doing it for a career. You know what I mean? And that's why I want you to do the journaling to get rid of that perfectionism of writing, because it doesn't have to be that way. You do want it to make sense to other people, but you don't have to be an award-winning author. So definitely get rid of that concept, but definitely practice, practice, practice. Um, Other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So I guess I'll say, is there any questions or, oh, there's a question. What is in the opinion, what is your opinion on using the receipt name in the subject? I think that's perfectly fine. It seems more personal, I guess. Sometimes it may not be necessary because, it is their email. So like, but at the same time, it doesn't get used often. So that would be a unique approach. And it's kind of like, I don't know how other people feel that way about it. Really, I guess kind of think from your own perspective. Like, how would you feel if somebody put your name in the subject? And then kind of just work from there, because whatever you might feel about something, somebody else probably does as well. But I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's a unique approach. The only people who really do use it is like spam emails, and So that might be like the thing to compare it to. But it just comes along with like how do you use their name and like what is their name sitting next to? Because you want it to come off. I don't know. You want it to be specific. You still want to be able to address what the email is about in the subject. So yeah. But no, it doesn't necessarily have to. It's more about like what you say. Favorite writing exercise. I didn't talk about this. My favorite writing exercise. It's probably the metaphor maker, which I didn't get to. Either the metaphor maker or writing a pantoum. Um, so the metaphor maker is which is also helpful for email because again, like as a poet, like my art is very attractive because of how I say things, how I use description in a way that people don't normally speak in or, see when it comes to everyday writing. So I'm very picky about my word choice and how I speak. So metaphors and figurative language is very important to me. And that's why it's heavily incorporated into my workshops, literary devices. I mean, um, so when it came to metaphors, again, like my writing process, I needed to define that. And I couldn't just wait on inspiration to fall for every single metaphor that I write. I had to realize, all right, how can I create a dope metaphor from scratch? And then after realizing this metaphor maker, which is composed of adjectives, concrete nouns, and abstract nouns, you kind of learn the formula for the foundation of a metaphor, and then you're able to kind of like tie other words into it in order to in order to expand on that metaphor. But that exercise helps you get the basic sense of what the metaphor is first, intentionally, and then you can build on that instead of just like, oh, I found a metaphor and I'm gonna write it down, like, because that doesn't always work. So that's probably my rate. I'm not gonna get into the pantoum though. That's a lot. But yeah. Any other questions? I saw some people hopped on and hopped off. I probably should have did like a presentation slide to show like we're working on such and such, but next time.
But I'm hoping there weren't issues with the WebEx. I got a lot of beeps at one point, but then I wasn't seeing a
Yeah,
lot of people popping in and out.
for sure.
Do you have any thoughts? I know, like in the work that we do on Launch Dayton, we're usually trying to share resources, sometimes promoting our own programs, oftentimes promoting entrepreneurs in the community. And so trying to write, like, to persuade people or to get someone to open the email or to take a look, or something
Mhm.
like that. Any thoughts or advice you can offer on um, trying to use some of that marketing and that persuasion, but still be authentic in your communication?
Yeah. That's it. Really comes down to being authentic. Like really again, like don't try to be robotic. Don't try to make it a sales pitch. Be yourself 100%. If you are marketing a product or a service, then really get down to understanding like why does my audience want this? Why am I even trying to persuade someone to open this email? Like what is the purpose of that? Because that's really what it comes down to, how you speak about it. Um, excuse me, is understanding the purpose behind it. Once you really have a good idea of what the purpose is, then your writing in reverse to get to that point, if that makes sense. So just like a lot of great writers ask you questions to get you to arrive to a certain destination on your own. They're not leading you with their own words and like their own experience and things like that. They're just asking you questions to get you to think in a certain direction. So that's what you kind of want to do with the subject is you want to write in a direction that's going to lead them straight into your email and not past it. Um, and again, like that looks different. I can't really tell you what to say exactly. It would depend on the subject. But okay, say like my workshop specifically. So I have originally like my workshop was for like this broad just like anybody who wants to write can come write, but like again everybody doesn't consider themselves writers. So how do I get into the audience that I really want to tap into if I know that my some of my audience thinks a different way? They don't consider themselves writers. But then how do I also get the attention of people who do consider themselves writers? And instead and not cater directly to the people who don't consider themselves that, because I want to touch on both. So like I came to the realization like, okay, my formula is about a habit, it's about a process of writing. It's not giving you one thing really. So in reality I'm helping you get rid of writer's block. So if I drop a subject that has something to do with getting rid of writer's block to somebody, to my audience, if that person is truly for me, then they're definitely going to open that email like, oh, I'm trying to get rid of writer's block. Let me see what he's talking about. Or like how I broke it down even further. Because originally I didn't have an email workshop, a social media workshop, or in poetry. It was all in one. So now, like me drawing out, like, hey, come out and learn how to write the perfect email. It's like, oh, like I definitely have trouble writing emails. Let me come to this workshop. So it's really about like what is the purpose for what you're trying to get across, and how can you write to push them in your direction. And you really have to get down. It's really about specificity. And the more specific you are, the better you're going to reach your target audience. And don't be afraid to like for people to not open it, or for people you don't reach. It just means that they weren't for you, and they aren't really your audience or your customer. Or it may take a little bit more for them to come in, but there are people out there who are for you, who is your audience, and those are the people who are going to click when it comes. The more you practice and the more you work on putting your message out there, and it's really about consistency as well. Some people are just a little hard to crack than others, but be consistent and don't definitely don't give up if you feel like people aren't responding, because trust me, like it will definitely pick up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other specific questions from folks? Kelly, I know you were talking a little bit about using the names and not wanting to look like spam. Um, I think for me, when I see an email that comes through with my name in it, I know that has been like auto generated typically, or that's what I assume, because it's not usually. I feel like the people that I'm having one-on-ones with aren't thinking about that. And so that's just I don't necessarily think less of the email that comes through that way or more. I know that's from a list, that's not a one-on-one email. I don't know if that helps you at all. But I wanted to offer some thoughts on that since you are concerned with that.
And usually this is like I'm condensing a lot down. Usually this workshop, I will work with people. I do a online workshop through Google Classroom, which is a 2-day session. So 2-day sessions for social media writing, or getting the perfect caption, writing the perfect email, and then also for creative writing or poetry.
So I am going to read some of the chat just because we'll be posting the webinar later, so that they won't have access to the chat. But yeah, so some of the conversation in the comments is one folks said, I feel kind of weird when that happens, when an email comes through with a name on it, and so they're typically less inclined to open it unless they know the sender. And then the original asker sort of feels the same way, but that's what is taught that you're supposed to do. And so not to speak for Leroy, but I think that conversation about being authentic, if that's what you've been told you're supposed to do, but you're not comfortable with it, then I'd say don't. If you are comfortable with it and authentic, and speaking that way feels authentic to you, then it's all right. I think if you're struggling with it, probably try some email subject lines without it, and see how those play, and see if you get more opens and that kind of thing.
Definitely plug and play. You gotta see what works. Don't be afraid to fail. Failing is lessons. Get some feedback. Talk to other people. See how they feel about it. Get a general survey, I guess. Just from other people around you and see how they feel about it, and that can kind of show you, how other people feel about it. Because really, it's hard to just come up with a process by yourself, and then try to put it out into the world, and you had no interaction with the world coming up with that process. Yeah, education doesn't happen in a vacuum, so you can't just like sit by yourself and feel like you're going to come up with all the answers. Definitely get to know some other people. Definitely ask for their feedback. Um, just to get a gist of how the world is interacting with them, and that way you can still be yourself and authentic, and you can interact and communicate with other people in the way that they kind of like to communicate as well. So get a feel for that, I would say.
And then we have another question in the chat. Do you have thoughts on do's and don'ts when sending professional emails within your organization? Email culture has definitely shifted over the years and sometimes gets really personal.
Man, this is my personal answer. And I feel like that's all I can really give, my experience, my personal answer when it comes to something like that. But I'm very real. And that doesn't mean like I'm rude or like uh, I kind of, for the most part, like I'm making sure that I'm reading everything correctly. And I make sure that I ask questions. Um, Definitely have to come to an understanding before kind of like replying in certain ways. I don't think that it has to be 100% like professional. To me is kind of like this like fake wall. It's like it's there. Professionalism is there when you have your interview, and then sometimes it's there with like the manager or some higher up seat. But in reality, like people are still authentic in the workplace. People still kind of talk, you know, normal, I guess, in their own like slang or however you consider yourself to talk. And I don't really, it's hard for me to even really tell, what professional is, because it kind of shifts depending on your work environment and how those people, how the culture of that workplace is kind of set. But I do think when it comes to communicating in within like the professional realm, it definitely is about like clear communication and coming to an understanding. Because people communicate different, and it's easy to take something the wrong way. It's easy for somebody else to take something the wrong way. So keeping calm, asking questions, kind of like really making sure that you're reading things right, so that you're replying in the right way. But it gets tricky. Do's and don'ts specifically though. Uh, Do's, always CC if necessary. Um, Always assume positive intent. Um, I think that me personally, I think that like kind of like using like laughing language, we've come to use like LOL, or like we use like smiley faces and stuff like that. Like I like doing that. I think it makes your email look a little more personal. I don't think it's unprofessional to use smiley faces and really kind of communicate that you have emotions and that you laugh. Like that's perfectly fine. Um, uh, I wouldn't say use abbreviations and like shorten text for like for like words or phrases, because not everybody really knows what that means, and that just comes down to more communication. I would really say keep it basic. Keep it basic. That's professional to me, but be yourself at the same time. Um, you know.
Yeah, I feel like that. And again, sorry, but just jumping in.
You,
I've worked in a few different sizes of organizations. So some very small, and then some larger, more corporate. Um, in places as well. And I feel like some of that definitely depends on what type of internal email is being sent. Like if it's coming from the CEO and going out through a large organization, then I would say stick a little more old school, like no emojis and that kind of thing. But like my like immediate team that I work with day to day, like are we text sometimes, we Slack sometimes, we email sometimes, and so it's like a very fluid communication channels, and it's
yeah,
not very formal. And it pretty much like those things can cross over as far as how we communicate. But then if I'm sending something like to my boss's boss, I'm not sending anything like that. I'm going more not formal isn't quite the right word, but not casual either.
mm,
And so I think it kind of yeah. So the comment in the chat is sounds like each organization and team should be aware of its culture and agreed
yeah.
upon avenues of communication. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, that is number one. Like you have to know your environment and who you're talking to because it changes. And really, I would say like as far as getting really personal, I don't get personal with emails. I can laugh, I can play like, but I definitely don't get personal. I think that my work environment is very separate from like my personal life or my school life. These are different communities, different spaces. I may have friends within them, but for the most part, like the people who I work with aren't really my friends. Like we are, and that's just me personally. Like usually we're not really friends. We can be cool. We are associates. We talk or we may, grab a drink after work or something sometimes. But for the most part, like they aren't a heavy part of my lives. If I left this job, would I continue talking to this person? Probably not. And that's okay. Like some relationships are supposed to be short lived. And that's why you definitely have to have an understanding of like what that environment is like and how it practices because you have to have boundaries are very important. Colleagues, yes. um Boundaries are definitely important, man. So whether it be your colleagues, your friends, or whoever, even within the email, have your boundaries. And that doesn't mean it's a rule for the other person. It's just where you're allowing yourself to go, or what you are allowing to deal with. Somebody else might get personal with their emails, but if that's your boundary, not to, definitely make that clear.
And on the flip side, I think that same kind of idea applies if you are looking more emails to customers, like what brand do you have? Are you a very personal
Yeah,
brand, or are you like the voice that you have should be consistent across how you will interact with people, like if they met you in person and not just through email, or if they see you on social or go to your website, having that like consistency across all those
yeah,
different writing writing platforms and communication platforms too.
right. I'm an artist though, so like the conversations are very different. From like any professional environment I've been in. It's been a while since I've been like in a more professional. But I usually just keep it pretty simple, man. That always works. So
What is that? Keep it simple, stupid
right,
acronym that you see
yeah,
can apply to your written communications too.
yeah, definitely.
So in the chat, Kelly says I'm in insurance, so the conversations are rarely fun. So
Hey, so
that's fair.
you might have to be the person to make them fun. Even if the conversations are fun, I'm sure they still like fun. Sometimes you gotta shake things up, and I'm all for being the if I got to be the only authentic, like real fun person around. Even if you can handle business and still be fun. So I don't think there's nothing wrong with that, but I definitely understand how they are really.
was gonna say you might be able to be more fun at the front end,
Yeah,
because you're protecting yourself and nothing has gone bad yet in theory.
yeah.
But I don't work in insurance, so I could be totally wrong in that assumption.
Oh, you a fun person? Yeah, bring the fun to work. I'm all for it. Test the waters, though. I'm not telling you to just walk in there and lash out, but test the waters. Tell a few jokes, make a few puns. You know what I mean, and make other people feel comfortable and fun to be. So they kind of gravitate towards you, and then you become this ball of light at work where you are the fun person, and people love you because you bring something different to the space. There's always good to have that type of person around. So don't be afraid to be that.
And that could be a space too in insurance where um, maybe people, I don't know, maybe people, I don't have like a personal relationship with my insurance rep necessarily. Like I see them
Mm,
regularly, we're friendly. Um, so that could be, a little more personality might be another way to um, engage people that way.
yeah,
For the folks that do want more of a relationship with someone if they're going to be doing a lot of work with their insurance contact.
right. Man, I appreciate y'all. Y'all got good questions and everything. Thanks for receiving emails from brands. Share personal. Yeah, I think that's important. It's the connections that I've seen from people that form are always based out of authenticity and being personable. Um, it's like it's being able to relate. It's being able to see parts of yourself in somebody else. It's seeing somebody else give you the confidence to be yourself, or to feel relaxed or feel comfortable. And you know it's before it's like we lived in this society where it's business, 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 and everything started to seem really unauthentic, and now people are gravitating towards things that in brands that are just a little easier to connect with, and that's just because they're using this language that is personable. So I would definitely continue to use that if that's what you like to see. I'm sure other people like to see it as well.
We'll say we're coming up on two. Thank you all for joining us and being such active participants today.
Indeed.
Any final questions while we have Leroy with us? Going once, going twice.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Leroy, for being so awesome and putting on this workshop with us today. We will be posting online, so if you hopped on a little bit late and want to see the beginning, Launch Dayton will have it going up on Facebook and YouTube. And if you registered through the Eventbrite, then I have your email, and I will be sending out a follow-up email. If you didn't register through Eventbrite and you want that follow-up email, drop it in the chat, and I'll make sure that we get it to you. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much, Leroy, for making the time and sharing your knowledge today.
For sure. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. If you need anything else from me, anybody look me up. Follow me at Leroy D Bean. Like I said, I do workshops, one-on-one sessions through Google Classroom. If you need any advice or anything moving forward, feel free to reach out.